Before we go into America and the crumbling and what we're seeing right now, can I start out by saying something that may make you feel better? It certainly makes me feel better when I think about it in this way. We are put here on purpose. God put us here on purpose in this specific time on purpose, meaning you, me. When we lament what's happening in America, and there's so much, and we're going to go into how we're fading and why we're fading and things like that in a moment. I'll tell you, I shouldn't put words in your mouth. I can get down about it, really genuinely down about it. I've let it, especially in the last year or so, I've let it get to me on a personal level where I take the microphone or take the earpiece out and go home and my wife will be able to tell that I'm down, I'm just kind of angry. But I need to not do that. And you need to not do that, even as we go over all the problems, because we are put here in this time and place on purpose. This is when God wanted us to live on this planet. There are different time periods for empires. There are. We're not unique in what we're going through here. Empires begin, normally a hard scrabble beginning, fighting. And then if they're lucky, they win and they begin to flourish and they begin to grow and prosper. And the people in that empire, the people in that nation, they benefit so much from it and they live these wonderful lives. And then once empires reach their peak, they're so wealthy, so powerful, nothing will ever take them down. That's happened a million times throughout history. Then things begin to rot. They begin to rot from the inside. It's always from the inside. They begin to rot and empires start to lose any connection with what they were, with what made them great, made them powerful, and they just kind of start to come down around us. And look, the story of empires rising and falling, no two stories look exactly alike, but one thing we do know throughout history is there are two things that can sink any empire of any size. It doesn't matter how big and powerful an empire is. If your empire takes on too much debt, if you spend too much, more than you take in, and if you import people who are hostile to your culture en masse, those two things, unfettered illegal immigration and debt, can sink any nation of any size. I always liken it to a gigantic ship. Picture the most powerful ship on the planet, battleship, aircraft carrier. You look at these things. You ever been around one? I've been on one before. They look unsinkable. And it's not just the size, the armor. The armor is so thick, they're made to withstand artillery shells. It looks unsinkable. And from the outside, it almost is. But if that ship begins to take on water, it doesn't matter how big and powerful it is, how much armor it has, with enough water, the ship goes down. Look, illegal immigration, it matters so much more than even we sell it. It's not just about crime, violent crime. It's really genuinely not just about that. That's one of the side horrors of illegal immigration. It's not just about the financial strain illegal immigration puts on a nation. Remember, these people we're importing here into this country en masse. They're a problem. Remember when I went on Tucker and talked about this? It's not an accident, as you well know. You talk about this all the time. It's not an accident what's happening on the border. The people who lead the nation from the federal level, that's Democrat politicians, half the Republican politicians, every bureaucrat, they are encouraging flooding the border with illegals. They're encouraging it. That's just what they want. They want America full of illegals, no loyalty to America, criminals, rapists, murderers. That is what they want, because when you cause violence and chaos in a society, that's the fertile soil where communism grows. People will always turn to the government and beg them for help when that kind of societal collapse comes. So they know this. So they're inviting it. Well, other countries around the world are obliging, as countries always have in this situation. Hey, there's a country I don't particularly like. They have an open border. We do have this prison full of rapists. Hey, guys, why don't you just move on to America? We know this is happening in countries like Venezuela, where they're emptying prisons onto the border. We don't have criminals coming here individually. We have entire criminal networks coming here. The country is being undone now, and it cannot be reversed. What's happening right now? I want everyone to understand this. Let's say everyone gets their wish, and Donald Trump beats Joe Biden in November, and woohoo! You cannot possibly, it's not humanly possible to deport this many people. If Joe Biden's going to bring in 10, 12 million people, almost all of them will be here permanently, and all of their children will be American citizens. And there's not going to be some mass deportation, no matter what people say on the campaign trail. The American people have no stomach for that whatsoever. Even if they think they do right now, it would be one video of a little boy crying as mommy gets thrown in the back of a paddy wagon to be deported, and all deportations would stop. Republicans would grab their ankles for the media like they always do, and everything, oh, we need to do this more humanely. So that's the situation we're in. We cannot stand by and watch the United States of America be destroyed, and people have to understand how dire this situation is. This is the stated policy now of the Democrat Party. So even if Joe Biden gets bounced in 2024, woohoo, we get some deportations in. The next time there's any Democrat president, it'll again be open season, and the entire world will know. Criminals, drugs, rapists, everything flooding into the country to destroy it. The time is now to create a coalition in a totally separate immigration force. That's what we have to do. It's true. The crime, the financial strain. But before we move on to the debt portion of it, the cultural strain is not one we talk about, and it might be the most important thing. You must share common values if you're going to remain a nation. You must. It's not an option. You must have common cultural values, or you're not a nation. A bunch of warring tribes stuck inside of a border. You can't import other cultures from all over the world and stay a country. You simply can't. It doesn't work. And that's what we've done. And that's some of the water in the ship. The rest of the water is the debt. And I'm not Johnny come lately. I know debt's starting to be a hot topic. I've been talking about this, for years. This is me back in 2021 when I had hair. The GOP lined up for the last 4 years. 4 years. And voted yes, and voted yes, and voted yes, and voted yes on multiple, massive spending bills. Truth is, no one cares. And no one's going to care until the whole house of cards come crashing down. And everyone's going to look around and they're going to say, well, how'd this happen? How'd this happen? Now, well, here's the hard truth of it. Talk about making you uncomfortable. Here's the hard truth of it. When that happens, you and I will both have to go look in the mirror and say, that's on me. I never demanded better. So I never got better. You get what you get. Don't throw a fit. And here we are, 34 trillion in debt. The number keeps changing for the worse, but it looks like as of next year, just paying the interest on the debt will be the largest line item in the American budget. And you see, we're going to get to a place really quickly where we can't make those interest payments anymore. And when that happens, what will they do? They will bludgeon us with taxes. They're certainly not going to cut any spending for themselves. They'll bludgeon us with taxes. They'll print more money than they're already printing now, try to print their way out of it, which will make inflation even worse. The cost of everything in your life continues to go up, 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 and up. We are simply following the exact same playbook that nation after nation after nation has followed throughout history, and that we are heaping debt and illegals onto ourselves, and we are undoing ourselves. And I'm so frustrated that the people who know this won't do anything about it. Remember when I asked Senator Marsha Blackburn, hey, do any of these people give a crap about this debt situation? Do they realize that the party's going to stop at some point, and then it's not going to be any fun being in D.C.?
What is so interesting, they don't think it's going to happen on their watch. And there is a thing, and my grandmother used to say this all the time, you can be liked or you can be respected. And what they want to do is be liked. They want people to love them. So they just keep cranking out those printing presses, and they think they're going to be long gone before the bill comes due. But the person that's going to be toting the note on all of this out of control spending is our kids and grandkids. And what we are doing to our grandchildren today is capping their opportunities in future years because they're going to be burdened with this national debt.
That's how horrible these people are. Well, yeah, they don't know it's coming. I think it'll be after they're gone. And that's where we are as a country, watching the people who lead our nation essentially author our ending. Is there another way to put it? They're writing America's ending. They're writing it down in the book. Endless illegals, endless debt, and we can't seem to make these people care. And I get so frustrated about that. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right. The amazing Victor Davis Hanson. How long have I been reading Victor Davis Hanson? 20 years, probably. I'm a huge fan. He's going to join us to talk about these things. Next. Well, the show, we're talking about America. Are we on our last legs? Can we rebound? What's going on? What's all this look like? But our next guest, somebody I've been reading for, 20 freaking years, actually has a book out called The End of Everything, talking about how this could end us all, not just America. Victor Davis Hanson joins us. Before we get to the wars themselves, Victor, let's talk about debt first. It's something I try to emphasize to people as much as possible, that debt, no matter how big and powerful a nation is, can sink nations, and it has many times throughout history.
It has, and as you know, we're borrowing about $1 trillion every 100 days. And the defense budget, we spend less on the defense budget than we do on the interest on the debt. And historically, Jesse, there's ways of dealing with the debt, but they're all bad. I mean, you can inflate the economy as Germany did after World War I, hyperinflation to pay off the debt to bondholders with cheap dollars, or you can renounce the debt, as some Latin American countries just say, well, wealthy people hold most of it, so we're just not going to pay them. Or there's some people on the left that have argued that we should give you Social Security credit if you turn over your 401ks or something like that. So all of the choices are bad, but it's crowding out the budget. We got by because we had de facto zero interest rates, as you know, and now the party's over, and we got to pay these debt holders at 5% and 6%.
So, Victor, where are we going to go from here? Not where you want us to go or where I want us to go, but it's just the debt situation's so bad, and our government is so bad, so rotted and corrupt. I just find it, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer here, but I find it hard to believe that a corrupt organization like our government could ever navigate our way out of a situation this bad in any way that doesn't just doom us all.
Yeah. Well, I think traditionally when the government won't act or can't act or doesn't know how to act, there's self-correcting measures. I think it was Herb Stein, you remember the guy that worked for Nixon, Secretary of the Treasury. He said, what can't go on won't go on. And then it's just a question of when the system won't sustain it any longer, can they correct it radically at the 11th hour, or does it overwhelm you? So, and that's true of the border. It's true of our challenge military. It's true of crime. We're getting to the point with all of these, I guess we'd call them at the tipping point, and either we're going to correct them or they're going to overwhelm us. One of the ironies is the architects of these left-wing systems of thought and modalities, they thought they were exempt from the consequences of their own ideology. But the other day, Adam Schiff was lost his clothes. They were stolen from him in his car in San Francisco, and the mayor of Los Angeles had her home broken into. And we had Steve Buscemi was attacked on the streets of New York. And so you're starting to see that no one is immune, no matter how wealthy, what zip code, from crime. And the military is in really bad shape, 45,000 recruits. So no matter what Mark Milley says or Lloyd Austin says about, rooting out white supremacy, et cetera, if people in the lower and middle classes, usually white males from rural America, don't want to join, and 45,000 of them haven't, it doesn't really, you can't get them back unless you treat them as you would anybody else and stop demonizing them with this woke vocabulary. So that's a big issue that nobody talks about. And yet that demographic died at double their numbers in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah, rural white boys from Louisiana, Montana. They've been winning America's wars for a long time. And I'm actually glad you brought up the military, because there's something about World War II that most people don't know, because we like to lionize and glorify it, understandably so. It's our finest hour and all that. But there were over 400,000 mental casualties in World War II. That was with a military made up of mostly people who came from nuclear families, solid values, mother-father homes, things like that. If we were to ever, God forbid, get in some kind of horrific conflict like that again, I don't think people understand how bad the LGBTQ military would shatter mentally. It would be horrific, Victor.
Well, in 1941, we had people in the Marine Corps, they were called the old breed. They had been in the peacetime military, they had fought in World War I, they were in their 40s, and they trained the entire 1st Marine Division, 6th Marine Division. And then we had a whole bunch of draftees that came out of the Depression. So they had nothing. I remember my father, I said, "Why did you join the Army Air Corps and go in a B-29 40 times?" And he said, "We got 3 square meals. It was the first time we had clean uniforms. We had money." And so that generation is very different than ours, or what we were raising right now. They weren't leisured, they weren't affluent, they weren't smug, they didn't hate their own system or their own culture. They were very idealistic, and that was what won the war.
Victor, you brought up the border and illegal immigration. I say often that illegal immigration and debt are the two things that can sink a nation of any size or strength. You cannot import other cultures by the million. It's beyond this, the healthcare costs and the crime. You can't water down your culture like this and survive, can you?
No, we're reaching I think that's a good point. In numbers and percentages, we've never been in this territory. We have 55 million people who were not born in the United States, and we have various categories. And then we have 16% of the population. And more importantly, the host, that's us, we don't believe in civic education, intermarriage, assimilation, integration. We let people revert to tribalism. And we're bringing people in from illiberal regimes, whether it's students, they're saying death to America on our campuses, or people who feel that this moment they cross the border, the southern border, they have claims against us, the host, of unfairness, or they need better hotel accommodations. It's just surreal. All we'd have to do is just, enforce federal law, finish the wall, stop catch and release. Trump finally did it by 2020. He had a paradigm that was working. Joe Biden blew it up.
Your book talks about wartime destruction of civilizations. And this is something people don't consider, because we've been so safe here in the United States of America. We don't have raids coming across our border every day. We don't have a major power threatening us. But this kind of thing has happened before and will happen again, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. And I looked at ancient Thebes, Carthage, Constantinople, and the Aztec Empire, just to take 4 examples. And there was a lot of similarities. They thought that they were invincible. They had been the premier city-states and empires of their regions. They felt they didn't need to reinvest in their military. They said their fortifications were preeminent. They'd never been breached. They felt that their adversaries would not dare target them, or if they did target them, they wouldn't have a chance. They didn't have any idea who Alexander the Great was, or Scipio, or the Sultan Mehmet. And so it is the more I wrote about these societies, the more I got worried about us, because we think we're still the greatest generation, that our military is the top military in the world. And we feel that our universities are preeminent still, and you can see they're not in many of their disciplines. And financially, we're a wreck. So, but we discount the Chinese. They would never do this. And yet the modalities of destruction, whether it's AI or chemical or biological or especially nuclear, are so much more effective and rapid than muscular strength of the past. It is scary because human nature stays the same across time and space. And we saw that on October 7th. We not only saw that on October 7th, but for that 20-day period before the IDF even replied, we had people on campus protesting. We forget now they weren't protesting against the IDF in Gaza, which hadn't gone in yet. They were protesting to brag about the murdering, decapitation, mutilation that took place on October 7th. They were happy about it, at least at my campus at Stanford, and I think on most campuses.
Victor, just finally, you brought up nuclear, because this is something I think about often. It's something you talk about. We have the benefit of being a nuclear power who's alone, but there are other nuclear powers. They surround each other. India's right next to China, who's right next to Russia, and this is a bad situation. Why?
Well, for a couple of reasons. One is we're starting to see nations line up against us. Russia, who has 6,500 nukes, China, that's probably got 1,500, North Korea, there's maybe have 20, Iran, that probably has some. And now we're seeing India, that was a staunch ally, feel that while they don't like this axis, they might want to put their toe in the water because they can't count on us. And so we've got a lot of enemies with a lot of dangerous weapons. And then, tell you the truth, 40 years after Star Wars at Reagan, we don't have any defense. We watched the effective Iron Dome tripartite systems of Sparrow and Patriots in Israel, but we have nothing comparable to that. And, we're with all the money that we have borrowed, the 36 trillion, you think some president would have said, I'm going to spend $500 billion and make sure that none of our enemies can hit the U.S. mainland. But instead, we do things like let a Chinese balloon traverse our country with impunity. So it'd be hard to think of a way to hurt America more than we've done the last few years.
The book is The End of Everything. I can tell you this right now. It will be ordered on my phone about 5 seconds after I hang up with Victor Davis Hanson. I cannot wait to read it again. Sir, I'm a big fan. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me. Come back soon, please. How about that? We'll be back.
I cut the national debt so far. And still got all these other things in.
I cut the national debt. We are adding $1 trillion to the debt every 100 days now. And that, because in interest rates and other things, the spending, that number is going up. Not only do we have this gigantic debt bomb that's getting ready to explode all over all of us. In fact, it already is. That's why we can't afford groceries anymore. The people who could do something about it are not only denying that it's a problem, they're pretending like they fixed the problem. This is why I speak so emphatically about this. It's not as if they're trying to fix it and they're just doing it the wrong way, or they're trying to fix it and they're not going fast enough. They're pretending like there's nothing to fix, that they've already fixed it. It's a lot. I'll tell you, you remember when we had Rand Paul on the show? We had Rand Paul on the show. He's been so on point about fiscal issues, about so many issues for so long. Rand Paul and me, we chopped it up a little bit and talked about this. Remember this? All right, shifting gears here. Obviously, everybody is watching world affairs at the moment, and anyone who knows anything about history is a bit apprehensive right now, Senator, about everything going on, several different conflicts, several different fronts, and it looks like several conflicts to come. In the United States of America, Americans don't like this now. We don't have any money, Senator. We don't have any money. I have this thing that I tell everyone every time there's a headline of we're doing something, that we're borrowing money for that. We're borrowing money for the carrier groups. We're borrowing money for the border. We're borrowing money for everything. We don't have any money left. And Americans can't accept that we are going to have a different role going forward in the world, aren't we?
Yeah, if you want to look at how much money comes in, how much money goes out, we have about enough tax revenue coming in to pay for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and food stamps. Now, you could choose to pay for some other things, but basically the entitlements consumes all of the revenue. So every bit of what we spend on our military, about $850 billion, is borrowed. All $700 billion that's non-military discretionary, which is welfare programs, it's all borrowed. And we are in a bad place. So the people who say, why don't you want to send more money to Ukraine? My point is, well, we would have to borrow it from China to send it to Ukraine. And even though my sympathies are, against the people who have aggressively invaded Ukraine, I can't, my first obligation is to my country, and it's to the national security of my country. So I think the debt is so enormous, the $33 trillion debt, that's our number one threat. I don't think an external threat is what's going to take down America. I think what may take us down is we destroy our currency, destroy our economy, and then we have civil unrest. That's more likely to be our downfall than it is that we'll be invaded by an external enemy.
Senator, I'm glad you brought that up, because it floors me how inevitable this is. And I know that sounds dark, but it's not a Republican or Democrat thing or middle or anything like that. Look, the exponential growth of the debt and being able to even service it, it's black and white. It doesn't matter your opinion, my opinion, anyone's opinion on it. It's coming. And no one in that town you work in, with the exception of you and like 4 other people, seem to acknowledge the fact that this is coming. It is coming. We are going off the cliff, and no one wants to talk about it. Instead, they just meet to decide where to send more money we don't have.
And it's accelerating. In the last 3 months, we borrowed over $1 trillion in 3 months. This is over $300 billion a month. We have never, ever borrowed the money at this rate. And this is a real problem. And people say, well, we've done it for a long time and we've been okay. Well, one of the things we're facing now is basically everybody's losing their purchasing power at an accelerating rate. And people say, well, it's 7%, it's 9%. But if you're on fixed income, that can be quite significant. Retirees, people that are lower wage earners, get really hurt by inflation. But there's also a danger they don't talk about, and that's the precipitous loss of the currency. So there are things that people call a black swan event. If you look at the stock market, people say that a lot of the downturn of the last 100 years happened on 7 days. So 7 days had downturns enough that they wiped out enough wealth to be most of the losses in the stock market occurred in 7 days. Because people can act irrationally when they become fearful, there may come a day when people say, well, gosh, we've always used the dollar as a reserve currency. We've always thought it was more stable, but they keep borrowing so much money. And even Europe, as socialized as Europe is, Sweden balances their annual budget. Germany balances their annual budget. Half of the European Union actually balances their annual budget. And we're running $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion every year, and it's only getting worse. Our interest payments are building up. So there is a point at which there is a point of no return, and a point at which maybe people give up and there's a catastrophic run on the dollar. That will be the calamity that leads to chaos if that happens. I can't tell you that's going to happen or when it happens, but I can tell you that I'm worried about it. And so the only way to fix these things is to begin now. So anytime people ask me for money for anything, I mean, it could be for Santa Claus's birthday. You want to do something everybody's for, pay for it. Take it from someplace that's less likely that we don't need it. So for example, if people right now want more money for Israel, I'll vote for that. If you take it from someplace we shouldn't be spending it. So we have about $1 trillion still in an Afghan reconstruction fund that were given to the freaking Taliban. We're giving money to the government of Afghanistan that 13 of our soldiers died on the way out. They were killed by the Taliban, and we still have money going over to the Afghan government. I would cut all that out. We still have money that we give to the Palestinian Authority. Why do we do that? We have foreign aid that we give to dictatorships around the world. We give $1 billion to Egypt that has a dictatorship, and you can be put in prison for dissent. They have indefinite detention in Egypt. You don't get any trial, and yet we give them billions of dollars. So if people think something is a more justified cause, and I'm horrified by the violence that happens in Israel, I'll vote for more money if it's necessary, but it's got to come from someplace else where it's less necessary. I said this in front of a Democrat chairman recently, and he responded by saying, we shouldn't have to choose. And it's like, that's what being a legislator is supposed to be about, is making choices. what is most important. Mayors have to do it. County judge executives have to do it. Governors have to do it because they have a limited amount of money. Everybody chooses every year and sets your priorities on where you're going to spend your money. And yet in Washington, it's the only place on the planet, no priorities are set. If it's a good cause, we'll give you money.
That was me and Rand Paul. That was debt. But we have to talk about illegal immigration. We have an assemblyman from California coming up next, and he's got a lot to say. Hang on. That's our country now. Just a bunch of illegals just rolling in on the beach, taking off into California, disappearing into the ether. Joining me now, an assemblyman from California, Bill Essayli. Bill, honestly, Texas, we obviously have to deal with quite a bit of illegal immigration, but I'm not sure enough people really understand how much California is the epicenter of it. They're coming across the border, they're coming in through the oceans. You guys are just drowning in these daggone people.
Yeah, especially now that Texas is going to be enforcing its own borders because the Supreme Court allowed that to go forward. You know, it's like water. They're gonna take the path of least resistance. So now that's going to be California, and absolutely right. California not only has a land border connection with Mexico, but we also have the ocean, and we are having even in Newport Beach in Orange County, a very affluent community. They just had last week a boat show up with a bunch of illegal immigrants on it. They just jump out and run. And who's going to stop them? So that's what's going on right now in California. That is an everyday thing.
For people who don't understand it, how welcoming is the beautiful state of California to all these illegals?
Well, we're very welcoming and we're very generous, especially with our tax-paying dollars. So the state of California, beginning this year, 2024, California now offers free universal health care to all illegal immigrants, regardless of age and regardless of when you show up. So you can literally sign up for Medi-Cal as an illegal immigrant. And I asked the governor's people about this because we're having budget challenges in the state of California. And they said we're expected to spend $4 billion on this new program. They expect to add 700,000 new illegal immigrants into Medi-Cal. Never mind whether the system can handle 700,000 new patients or not. And my question is there a limit on how many people can sign up? Because I said, what you're doing now is you're creating a giant magnet for every illegal immigrant in every state to come over to California because we're just rolling out the red carpet. And they said, no, there's no limit on how many people can sign up. And that's just healthcare. And then we give out food stamps. We're now giving down payment assistance for home buyers. The list goes on. In-state tuition in our colleges, you name it, they get it.
So clear this up for me. A government program that claims it's going to spend $4 billion, so everyone knows that means it'll spend about $20 billion. I'm assuming that means that healthcare in California is super affordable for Californians and American citizens. Is that the case?
I wish it were the case. I mean, that's what they promised us after Obamacare. But no, I talk to people every day and they're spending, especially if they have a family and they're a business owner, they're spending a couple $1,000s a month just on healthcare. I know when I had my firm, I was spending, I think $500-600 a month just on my individual healthcare. So it is not cheap in California. And then the other piece of this that people don't really talk about is setting aside the cost. What is the quality or the access to healthcare in California? It is becoming harder and harder to find a doctor that has availability to take you. God forbid you need some specialist. They're booked out for months ahead of time. And the doctors don't want to work in California because the reimbursement rate on Medi-Cal is so low that they're getting paid pennies on the dollar for what they should be. And it's driving doctors out of the state. So not only is it an affordability issue, but we have a quality healthcare issue and access to care. And the hospitals are very worried that they're going to be driven into bankruptcy because California continues to do things like pass minimum wage laws. So last year they passed a law that healthcare facilities have to pay $25 minimum wage. $25. That's the lowest entry position. So everything above that has to go up as well. They're systematically trying to bankrupt the hospitals, and I do believe it might be by design so they can have the government come in and take them over.
Of course it would be. Could you explain what this bill is you have about illegal alien pedophiles who apparently can reside in California worry-free?
So California has been a sanctuary state for quite some time now. We had SB 54 passed, which basically made it illegal for law enforcement to cooperate with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We've seen many cases in which serious, violent, criminal, illegal aliens have been set free rather than handing them over to ICE. But last month, we had a really egregious example. We had an individual who had been released from San Bernardino County Jail. He'd been convicted of raping a minor. And he was released into the streets after he completed his prison sentence. He was found later in the state of Massachusetts, picked up by ICE for purposes of deportation. So this really caused a huge outcry and an outrage, as it should be, and why we'd release a pedophile into the community. So I'm introducing my bill, which is AB 2641, and this would repeal sanctuary state for anyone convicted of a sex crime against a minor. The question I get is, why just those crimes? Well, of course, I want to repeal it for all crimes, but let's at least start with this and have Democrats explain to the public why they believe pedophiles should be protected from deportation in the state of California. So that's the bill I've introduced, and I want the Democrats to vote on it and to take a position on which side they're on.
Well, Bill, I'm assuming your phone's been blowing up with Democrats who wholeheartedly and publicly support your desire to deport illegal alien pedophiles, right?
It's funny, actually, on social media, we actually do get support from some Democrat voters. But as far as the elected officials, absolutely not. In fact, the chair of this committee has refused to even hold a hearing on my bill. So we'll look at some alternative ways to force a vote on this. But the Democrat Party is all in on protecting criminal illegal aliens rather than victims or children in the state of California. I don't understand what goes through their mind. They have a duty to protect the public, a duty to protect children. I mean, as a prosecutor, there is no more heart-wrenching story or case than a crime that involves a child, because they're truly innocent. So why the Democrat Party keeps doubling down on this is just, it really tells you about who these people are and what their agenda is for this country.
Bill, give it to me straight. Can we save California? Because I love it, man. I've spent so much time out there. It's paradise. It guts me what these people have done to it. My goodness, if it was even halfway sane, I'd live there. Can it turn around? It doesn't look hopeful.
It depends on how you define success, right? I mean, are we going to have a complete takeover of the governor's office and the legislature? No, but there are important things that we can do in California. We can take over our local elected offices, which we are doing in California. We have parents now getting elected to school boards and standing up for parental rights. We're taking over sheriff's offices. We're taking over DA's offices. And when it comes to the legislature, California is a unique state. It was based on sort of a populist form of government. And there's a lot of protections built in for the minority party and the public, one of which is it takes 2/3 to pass taxes and to pass any big meaningful bills that are constitutional amendments in our state. So we are in the Assembly, we are 9 seats away from breaking the supermajority out of 80. So when you break it down and you look at, there are seats that are competitive that we can win back, but we're going to have to claw it back 1 seat at a time. It's not going to be like this massive red wave that's going to come and take over California. But we have seats here. We have a Republican that won in the Palm Springs area. He won by 85 votes in the last election. We have a Republican state senator who lost his seat by less than 20 votes. So there are places and opportunities to win, and we need to focus on those opportunities and start changing the narrative. And then my big pitch has been to the Hispanic community. I believe Hispanics are socially conservative. They're people of faith. They're very devout Catholics. And when they learn about what the Democrat Party thinks of their faith, how they mock them, how they honor the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, which are these trans sisters that
Oof.
pretend like they're nuns. And then here's really the heart of it. When they learn what the Democrat Party wants to do to their children, wants to indoctrinate their children in some of this radical gender ideology stuff, and then transition their kids at school while keeping it a secret from parents, they lose their mind. So we need to expose. So here's the biggest thing I think the Republican Party can do. They got to get their messaging together. We have to be rather than a policy shop, we got to be a comm shop. And we got to go out to the public and expose what the Democrat Party is doing to them and get people to leave the Democrat Party. And I say we need to have a campaign, because I think when people vote, they look at the letter behind the name, right? They don't really know who they're voting for. They just see a D or an R. And we need people to know, when you see the D after the name, that's for the Diablo. That is the party of deception. And Gavin Newsom is the deceiver in chief. So do not vote for anything that has a D after their name.
I like it. I don't hate it at all. Bill, thank you, brother. Keep on rolling. All right. We have final thoughts. Next. Let's understand something. We talk about the end of America. We just did a whole special on the end of America, but these things aren't all inevitable. Yes, there are some things we probably can't stop now, but if we dig in, we start bailing water, we get our butts off the couch, we go start running the dirty commies out of power, and we start putting in the work, we can turn this around. It won't be a man who does it for us. There's no savior coming. Either we will all collectively decide to get up and get involved, or that end we just talked about for an hour is coming. So let's not just accept it. Let's get up and fight back. We'll do it again.